Welcome, everyone. We are so excited that you are here tonight. We are in for an absolute treat once again. Pam and Melanie are going to share all the benefits for mental health and physical education and physical activities.
Thank you.
Hola, muy buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Arely. Si gustan pasar al canal de español, ya que Melissa lo haya puesto, les esperamos ahí para quienes tengan la necesidad del idioma en español. Muchísimas gracias y gracias por estar con nosotros.
All right, Melanie and Pam, go ahead and take on over.
All right, well, welcome everybody, and those of you who have returned from our previous one, and any new individuals who are coming to our webinar today. So today's focus is on physical activity and mental health in youth with visual impairments. Obviously, this is a very kind of timely and important topic, and we're really excited to share some of this information with you and hopefully give you some take-home messages and some really good resources that you'll be able to use once you leave the presentation today. So my name is Melanie Perot. I'm an associate professor at SUNY Brockport. I'm also communications director for the Institute of Movement Studies for individuals with visual impairment. And I'll let my colleague Pam introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. Welcome tonight or this morning, depending on where you're at. I'm Pamela Beach. I'm also a professor at SUNY Brockport, and I'm a co-founder and co-director of the Institute of Movement Studies for individuals with visual impairments.
All right, so do we just want to give you just a very brief overview of where we're from? So we saw kind of across the board where all of you are from, so we'll just give you a little bit of information. So we're housed at SUNY Brockport. Again, if you're not familiar with the kind of SUNY system, if you're not from New York State or nearby, we're located just west of Rochester, so that gives you kind of a major city. And of course, we're part of the SUNY system there. So we're more of a smaller regional institution. And then, of course, we mentioned that we're part of IMSV. That's kind of our abbreviation for the Institute of Movement Studies for individuals with visual impairment, because obviously it's quite a bit of a mouthful to say over and over again. You know, Pam's one of the co-founders, co-directors, along with our colleague Lauren Lieberman, who's pictured there in the center. So you can see she's in the middle there. And then I'm on the right and Pam is on the left. We're standing in front of a podium there. This was from the Charge Syndrome conference a few years ago. And I serve as communications director for IMSV as well. So we basically have four main pillars that drive all of these things that we do as part of IMSV. So one is programming. So we provide programming for both children and youth with visual impairments, as well as their families. You guys might have heard of Capabilities before. That's one of our big programs that we run. We also do quite a bit of education when it comes to working with individuals with visual impairments. This is kind of one of the ways that we do that and disseminate a lot of the research we do and kind of putting it into best practices for those who are working directly with these individuals. So scholarship is also a really big part of what we do. We do a fair bit of research and we present on that. And then we also provide a lot of leadership opportunities for undergraduate and graduate students as well. And we do a lot of collaborations outside of our institution too. So we kind of want to get to know who we're talking to today. So obviously knowing your audience is really important. So if you haven't done so already, and I know a few of you have already put this in the chat, if you could tell us what context maybe you're working in as. So if you're a TBI, an O&M specialist, physical educator, parent, advocate, whatever your role is, if you could kind of put that in the chat so we can get an idea of who our audience is today. All right.
TVIs, dual roles, comms and TVI.
University faculty,
right.
Student.
Right. Lucas, camp director.
Nice.
Comms, dual. Right. Rehab counseling. Okay. University faculty, TBI comms, children's program, adapted PE. Okay, we've got some variety, mostly TBI and COMS. All right, great.
Okay, good. So hopefully we can give you guys some take-home messages, some things that you can do in your own practice and working with the individuals that are part of your program or your organization. So another thing we kind of wanted to get a feel for, because obviously this topic is about mental health and physical activity, we wanted to kind of understand where you're coming from and maybe some of your experiences working with, whoever your population is and your role. So our first question is what are some of the mental health struggles do you find that the children are experiencing in your context? What are some of the issues that seem to come up pretty commonly? So if you could throw those in the chat as well, so we can kind of see what are some common things that are going on in your context. Okay, anxiety.
Okay.
Yeah, we experienced that even as faculty members. Depression, bullying.
Stress, low self-esteem, lack of self-efficacy, trying to fit in, acceptance. It's a big one. All right.
Being told they can't.
Okay. Barriers.
All right, good.
Transition anxiety.
Yeah, I'm starting to see several trends there, so that's good. So some of these things are going to come up in our presentation today. Another question is, again, because we're focusing on mental health and physical activity, is how much physical activity do you encourage in your contacts with the children that you're working with? Is there anything that you're doing in your contacts maybe help encourage those kids to do any types of physical activity? That could just be, exercise, it could be sport, it could be active transportation.
Jump out numbers, that's fun. Like gym workouts, taking a walk.
Beat
ball, that's fun. Right? Just adding walking to anything, adding a little bit of motion, adapted sports, stretching, yoga, sports camps, Special Olympics, community activities, line fencing, trying to get them into sports training camp. All right, great.
Yeah, lots of great things. Well, good.
PE inclusion, fabulous. All right, so to kind of preface this line, so we started to go into a little bit of a new direction for us to see some of the other benefits. We've mostly focused on motor development, motor competence, perceived motor competence, and different activities, but we wanted to see really, first of all, we wanted to look at what is out there right now as far as the effects of or the benefits of mental health with a physically active child with visual impairment. And so we have kind of a line of research going right now. And unfortunately, there's very little research particularly with this population. And so what we did was we then took the next step to find some surveys to validate that. And then in the summer, we're going to run an intervention. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later if anybody wants to be involved. But to kind of preface that, just generally some of the prevalence of mental health issues in youth, there's not too much on disability. And like I just said, there's very little with visual impairment specifically. So here's just some stats on this slide. The first stat is 4 million American children and adolescents with a serious mental disorder. 2 out of 10 children, so 20%, so between the ages of 9 and 17, with any diagnosable mental or addictive disorder that causes at least a minimal impairment. 1 out of 2 have mental disorders that begin around 12, and only 20% of children max. All right. I don't know if that was just mine. Mine's telling me my internet is unstable. All right, so more specifically with disability, we're finding that these rates are higher. it's probably not too surprising. So teens with disabilities are up to 5 times more likely to suffer from some type of mental, emotional, and or behavioral health disorder in comparison to teens without diagnosed disabilities. With youth with visual impairments do tend to have higher levels of depression and anxiety than their sighted peers. We've done some work with functional body image, and they do have poor body image as well. We also found some data on myopic children. They tend to have higher depression and anxiety scores than those with other causes of visual impairment. I'm not exactly sure why, but also higher anxiety scores. However, those who have corrected strabismus surgery have tended to show some improvements. So there really isn't a lot of data out there, but what we're finding, and again, not very surprisingly, is it is higher in individuals with a disability, and particularly with visual impairments. So as far as signs of mental illness, we just kind of like this as an illustration with a variety of different faces showing different moods. But really the key factor is look for something that is different from normal. So if you see a child that is normally very outgoing, who is now much more quiet or withdrawn, or they're making more emotional outbursts than usual, or just some type of overall change in what is their typical behavior, and is that change sustained? So it could be anywhere from they're not sleeping very well, and so then the sleep can of course cause more challenges for them. They might be feeling more anxious or depressed or unhappy. They're just not their typical self. So the key is, if you notice something that is unusual for that child, and particularly if it's going on for a longer period of time. So this is another illustration that is showing that this is very multifaceted. So there's a lot of different factors, and it's like the onion, everything kind of builds upon itself. So if we start down at the individual level, so we have a variety of factors and demographics that are going to affect that individual and how they are feeling, how they are coping, who they are. So their overall identity, their age, their genetics, their race, their ethnicity, any disabilities that they have, their overall beliefs, their knowledge, attitudes, coping skills. What really makes them who they are is going to really impact how they're reacting and how they are coping with different situations. And then you layer that with a variety of relationships. So the next level is family. So family relationships, particularly with younger children, the parental relationship is going to be the most important, and that is going to continue around till age 8 to 10, where they start to look more on to friends and peers, but their caregivers, who are closest with them, who's in their family unit, so their siblings. So those relationships, but also how those individuals are feeling or interacting or coping. So is their family mental health? So is their family stability or financial stability? Is there any other challenges or troubles at home? And I'm sure many of you can relate to, if a child is struggling, a lot of times there might be changes in the home that is making that struggle more and perpetuating that. So then taking it to the next level, the community, so it's extending beyond, so relationships outside of the home. So relationships with peers, teachers, mentors, religious groups, the school, inside, outside of the school, any type of pressures that they might be exposed to, extending beyond that, getting into the neighborhood. And so this is a big one, particularly with visual impairment. So that safety aspect. So how safe is that environment? How inclusive is the neighborhood environment? Do they feel safe to walk around? How comfortable are they able to get around? And that's really going to affect their overall well-being. Access to green spaces. Are there green spaces available? Is it close by? Healthy food options around them. What's their housing situation? Healthcare, air pollution, anything outside. And then it's getting even bigger. Society, sometimes even with young children, maybe some of the big issues that are occurring in society, you turn on the news, it's often very, very negative, very stressful. So how aware they are to some of these bigger issues that are occurring. So may impact some even younger kids hearing about all the big challenges that are occurring right now. All right, so I had mentioned a little bit about with students with visual impairments, that neighborhood piece. So being able to navigate and feeling comfortable navigating their environments. So their overall school environment, how inclusive that is. Are there inclusive playgrounds? Are there options and opportunities for them? So do they have access to those opportunities? Are their parents encouraging them and helping them to get to different places? So that can really help decrease a lot of that anxiety and improve their well-being and quality of life. Also, just some other things. So students with visual impairments are going to miss some visual cues. So facial expressions, eye contacts, gestures. So missing some of those cues can add some extra anxiety, not understanding what is going on around them. So just a couple of small points to consider as well.
So a little bit about physical activity. So obviously, Pam talked a lot about the mental health side of things. I'm going to kind of move into physical activity and again, get into that relationship with mental health. So what we know about physical activity in this population of youth with visual impairment. So we actually know quite a bit about their levels of physical activity. And generally what we find is that they have lower levels compared to their sighted peers. And we also find that their level of sedentary behavior is quite more than their sighted peers as well. So they spend more time kind of sitting, less time moving around. And then there's some graphics up here as well that kind of, again, reiterate this point. Basically, we have 74% of children do not get enough physical activity. And what do we mean by enough physical activity? Well, the recommendation is 60 minutes a day. So we're getting 3/4 basically of youth who are not getting the recommended amount. 38% of higher obesity rates are in kids with visual impairments. And we have 12.5 million kids classified as obese. So quite a lot, quite an epidemic that we're dealing with. I'm sure it's nothing new to the audience. So some other kind of stats here, just to kind of reiterate this point. So physical activity is 4.5 times lower for children with disabilities. So obviously this is a big deal. We want to make sure that these kids are physically active, not only because it helps their physical side, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but also because it has those mental health benefits. And also only 29% of children with a disability have PE classes 5 days a week. So obviously school age kids, a lot of times they're going to get that physical activity through physical education. But if they're not having that every day of the week, obviously that's going to put them at a disadvantage if they're not getting it from additional sources. So Pam talked about already the environment and those around them potentially being a barrier that can occur as well for physical activity in addition to mental health. So what are the important aspects of physical activity? So obviously there's the physical side, which we all know, so we have a lot of physical benefits, such as reduced risk of heart attack, better management of body weight, lower cholesterol, lowered risk of type 2 diabetes, as well as some cancers. But there's a lot of mental health benefits that come out of physical activity as well. So things like enhanced quality of life, better executive function, cognitive function, just being able to make better decisions, better judgments, faster processing, improve self-esteem, as well as a form of stress relief. That can be really beneficial too. And there's some additional stats on here, such as, exercise can be as effective as medication for certain levels of anxiety and depression and lessening those. There's this big push nowadays as exercise as medicine because it has all these potential benefits. So other things such as, increased energy levels, reduced depression, better sleep as well. So all those things that kind of contribute to our mental health and our well-being. So how can you help? Kind of where do you fit into this puzzle, right? So if we know that kids with visual impairment tend to have more potential mental health issues, and they're also not getting the recommended amount of physical activity, but there's this strong link between the two. So what can you guys do? Well, one of the first things you can do is sometimes it's just about recognizing, as Pam said, looking for some of those signs. in these kids? Are there changes in their behavior? Are they not attending things as often? Are there any changes in just their general demeanor? What is out of the ordinary that's happening? If you notice a substantial change, that might give an indication that, hey, maybe something is going on. So just that awareness component, I think, is really important initially. From there, what do you do? Well, one of the things that's really important is communication. So communication between your context and maybe the home environment, right? So having that connection with the parents so that you're both on the same page about what's going on. You might notice something in your context that maybe the parents aren't picking up on. Kids act differently in different places. So that's a really good way of making sure you bridge that gap, is opening those communication lines. From there, make sure you build on that relationship with the parent. Make sure you're kind of on the same page. You're having good, constructive, productive conversations, and you're being open and honest about that communication so that, again, you establish that trust, that real positive relationship between those two contexts. And then also make sure you're always coming from a place of empathy and compassion. You know, mental health issues are very touchy and there's a lot of stigma placed upon them. So making sure that you're using, you know, you're just coming forward with a lot of this caring and that you want to help the child and you're not being very judgmental about it, but you're there to help and support in whatever way you can. Another thing you can do as well is come up with ways that maybe you can help promote or increase physical activity. So let's say you're a parent, things like coming up with little physical activity breaks during commercials. Now, I know with streaming services, commercials basically don't exist anymore, but if there's ways to even integrate it within a show, you know, if something happens in a show, maybe that's like, okay, turn it into a game. Now we're going to get up and do some jumping jacks because this happened. There's ways that you can integrate it into some of their already existing activities. Having active transportation options, you know, having them ride a bike to their friend's house versus driving them if it's obviously safe and accessible. Walking or running to school, again, providing that active transport just to get them moving, and obviously playing games, other sports, other different types of physical activities. And of course, always ensuring that they're adapted appropriately to the child. So we have a lot of great resources that Pam is about to introduce you about how you can adapt a lot of just regular physical activities as well as sports so that an individual with a visual impairment can participate. So I'll turn it over.
Right. So we're going to share a variety of resources. So some of you that have been watching some of our webinars should be familiar with them. So we're going to highlight particularly those that are encouraging physical activity. So you can see there's so many different ways to get a child involved. So we have a sport inclusion video series, and so these are really designed for anyone that wants to get a child involved in a particular sport. So maybe helping them to learn some cues, get the right equipment, help them to get going. It's also meant for PE teachers, APE teachers, or even coaches, but anyone can really watch these to get some tips to get yourself going and learn something about those different sports, and including children with visual impairments. I wanted to show a little part of this particular video to also show just some tips on focusing on the comfort and comfort level of the child and helping them to kind of overcome some of those fears. So particularly with swimming and aquatics, what we found with a lot of different studies when we asked what children prefer the most as far as physical activity, most of the times they prefer swimming. But depending on the experience levels of the child, they might be really scared of swimming. So trying to kind of overcome that. So this is just a small portion of this video, but you can certainly access the full video for free through our website.
Positioning. The establishment of good positioning for a swimmer with visual impairment who has additional disabilities is important for a physically and emotionally safe environment. The positioning of the instructor in relation to the swimmer is critical for building trust and reassuring the swimmer that they will be well supported and safe throughout the swim session. This is critical for enabling the swimmer to explore their body in the water and perform to their greatest skill level.
So again, that was just a very short piece taken from that, just to give you an idea for what we have with our videos. We have another series that's called Outdoor Adventure Series, which includes paddleboarding, rock climbing, kayaking, fishing, biking, and hiking. So activities that are quite common in the summertime, and usually there's a lot of access to that. So learning some tips or tricks to be able to help a child participate in some of these activities. These are great for that. So we're going to show a little bit from the hiking video.
Ready to go for a hike?
Yeah.
And I think last time we did about 3 miles. What do you think about today? How far do you want to go?
About 4.
About 4 miles? All right, I think you're up to it.
All right.
So if you don't mind, could I use your hand to talk about the map and where we're going to go?
Yeah, sure.
All right, so I use your left hand. We're starting right here.
Okay.
We're going to do a big loop. Last time we did 3 miles, but if we go a little further, we're going to go all the way past our palm, way out to our middle of our fingers here, and then back to the same spot.
Okay.
All right?
Yep. Sounds good.
Last time we did 3 miles, we did it for about an hour and 15 minutes. How long do you think it'll take us to do 4 miles?
Maybe about an hour and 75 minutes.
I think that's a good goal. I think we can do that. All right, cool. Ready to go for a hike?
Yeah.
All right, so that was just a small clip from one of the outdoor series with hiking, and he was drawing a tactile map on his arm just with his finger to give an idea for kind of the loop and distance that they were going. And we've recommended a couple of these books in a variety of our talks. So the Physical Education and Sports for People with Visual Impairments and Deaf Blindness. So you can get a variety of activities and ideas, both instructional ideas as well as different sports for both youth as well as adults to perform and participate in. The Physical Education for Children with Moderate to Severe Disabilities. So if you need even further adaptations, this is a great one to give you a lot of different ideas. And these are our general websites that we've been including. So the APH website has a variety of books, products, equipments, and videos. The book Possibilities, Recreation Experience of Individuals Who Are Deaf Blind. So again, encouraging active lifestyle. So you can try to encourage them while you're with them, but encourage them to do other things outside of your time with them, trying to keep that active life. And our main one is the campabilities.org, and clicking on instructional materials. And Melissa has posted that on here as well, I believe. So we have tons of videos, tip sheets, books. So feel free to peruse through there. It's a wealth of information. Perkins also has a variety of resources, as well as USABA. So we have our contact information on here. Again, I'm Pamela Beach and my colleague Melanie Perot. So feel free to email us at any time. Like I said, we are really kind of diving into this area of the benefits of physical activity and mental health with youth, particularly with visual impairments, because there is really nothing out there. So we're trying to find out a little bit more. So this summer we're doing an intervention at Campabilities, and we're seeing if there's any differences between the children that are participating there versus at schools for the blind or recreational camps. So I don't know if you have anything else to add, Melanie, but I think we're open to questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. We have been doing a little research as well on body image in particular. It's got a strong connection with self-esteem. And we've already done some research on that and found that there is quite a connection between physical activity and body image for youth with visual impairments. In particular on how much they enjoy the activity has seemed to be the kind of reoccurring theme that's come out of that, which is pretty interesting. And we're also working on an intervention piece with that. So we'll have more details to come in the future. But thank you all for your attendance. I know we're a little bit over time. Sorry, Melissa.
No, you're okay. And I will say there is a question, and there was one about a book, and I put that in there for her, but there was a question that you stated that 29% of blind and visually impaired kiddos do not have PE 5 days. It just moved 5 days a week. Do you have the stat for sighted kiddos?
I do not
I
have a
do
stat of
not.
this. Yeah, it's also very regional, unfortunately. So it does vary quite a bit depending on perhaps a state or even within a state. One key thing though with kids with visual impairments is even if they have PE, they are not often given the same opportunities as the kids that are sighted. And so even if they are receiving more days in PE, it's unlikely that they're getting the same level as their sighted peers. But yeah, that kind of a loaded question because it does vary quite a bit.
There was a question, can you further explain your research project this summer that you mentioned with state schools?
So yes, so what we did was there weren't any questionnaires that even looked at quality of life for youth with visual impairments. So this past spring, we validated a couple of surveys looking at well-being and quality of life with youth with visual impairments. And so what we're going to do is a pre-post, and we have 3 different groups. We've got capabilities groups, so we want to see how kids that are participating in a lot of sports and activities, and it's highly unlikely they're not that active normally because they're very busy at camp. They don't get much chance to sit down. And then compare them with some groups in schools for the blind, as well as more of a vocational or recreational camp. And we're going to conduct some focus groups after that. So it's kind of like the first real step at looking at some of that data with youth with visual impairments.
Wonderful. And then one other question, it says, where are the camps you mentioned that you will be hosting, and where can parents be informed about possibly having their child participate?
So right now we collected data at the Texas School for the Blind, and we're doing Brockport Campabilities as our main site for the group, the physically active group, and we're using some of the Envision camps over near New York City this summer as well. We're open to including others, so if anyone is interested, please feel free to email me, and I'd be happy to try to see if we could include you. So always looking for more to be involved.
Awesome. Well, I think that ended our questions, and I can't thank you enough for all that you both are researching and how important it is to have our kids moving and our students engaged and really thinking about physical activities with that mental health kind of in the, not necessarily the back of our brains anymore, right in the forefront, and how that impacts everything that we do with them. So thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.